The oracle indicated that it was over 40 minutes from her location to Spreepark. Despite everything, she was in for an Odyssey. She decided to go there already, to get something to eat in the area, and took the bus. A few stations, she drove towards the Spree. On the way, she tried to reach Leon, wanted to ask if he knew a restaurant in the area. Maybe he would go out to eat with her right away. She was not averse to that. However, he left the call unanswered, and she sent him a message.
Heading into town? Going on a food hunt? What time do you want to meet and where?
She considered asking him about dinner together, deleted that part after she changed her mind. Dreamily, she looked out through the reflective glass, watching the evening city life pass by. That's when she noticed that it was starting to snow. She watched the flakes. In a cascade, they came down and disappeared. Their condition lasted until they changed into the new one. Briefly, she was overcome by the strange intuition that every single flake was animated, isolated from its source for the duration of its existence before returning to it. The thought would have been worth a laugh had she not been staring. Mesmerized. She was suddenly startled because she thought she saw the snowflakes fall from the ground and against the gravity vertically upward into the sky, while everything else took the usual course. Repeatedly she blinked so that this imagination would cease. After all, it could only be one. Not until the 6th or 7th blink did the snow fall again as usual. Once again, she suppressed what was happening before her eyes, what she was experiencing with her senses. Even though they authoritatively decided how she perceived the world, she distrusted them. Deliberately, she really just wanted things to be normal for her. But life often knew how to get around expectations. It ignored KLEIO's desire for normalcy. This way, she didn't want to forget her luxurious problems. She got off the bus at KLEIO.EXE. Superficially because she had spotted restaurants and snack bars nearby, subconsciously because she felt queasy on the bus. The feeling subsided somewhat when the outside world received her, the fresh air of a cool winter night. She strolled down the street, and with each step, the restlessness subsided. After taking in the surroundings, she had a hard time deciding on an offer. Inevitably, she wondered if people had already starved to death in the agony of choice. In order to duly honor her arrival in Berlin, she soon and somewhat little exclusively opted for the economy program of currywurst and French fries. She liked spicy food, and always felt like the German's definition of spicy was significantly milder than hers. She almost wanted to appear a little tough when she ordered the second hottest version from the gentleman at the stand. Even tougher when the gentleman tried to convince her that this sausage had it all. She ignored the subliminal sexism, thinking only of how homoerotic the idea was that only real men could gobble up a good spicy sausage. Instead, she told him that she could handle it. Her arrogance was punished after the first few bites. She awaited a purgatory. Immediately, she was endangered of suffocating in the inferno. Spontaneous human combustion no longer seemed an inconceivability. She hid the process as much as possible from the gentleman at the stand, who was already looking at her insinuatingly.
My throat is burning,
she thought, and that she must have misheard when the sausage seller spoke.
Well, honey, I guess it was too hard for you.
She heard him say it without his lips moving, and dismissed it as a sensory illusion. She repaid him by putting on her most hostile look, which was still not very threatening. Then the pain returned to her mouth again, and she countered with a few sips of mineral water. Unfortunately, it was more like she would spread it in her throat by doing so, and the carbonic acid would ignite microscopic explosions. The gentleman at the stand saw his prejudices confirmed. His satisfaction sufficiently punished KLEIO's ego. He could have saved himself the disgusting remark, but sad as it was. Such incidents were not uncommon. She did not want to sacrifice the last spark of pride and refrained from ordering any milk drink. The mineral water had simply resonated more with her. KLEIO had to bear the consequences of her decisions, and confess that her assumption about the German tolerance for spicy food was wrong, or at least did not have universal validity. After the napalm attack on her insides, she took a long walk in the direction of the Spreepark. A vibration suddenly emanated from her coat pocket. She took out her smartphone and saw the message from Leon.
Does 11 o'clock suit you? Still have work to do. We meet at Koperniker Landstrasse.
Wonderful.
She thought. So she had to bridge another good 3 hours without really having asked around what could be done in the evening. Fate sent her a sign when she looked down the street and noticed a movie theater. She felt it was a bit of a shame to go see a movie on the first night, but it was just the right pastime for that length of time when one had no other plans. KLEIO stepped in front of the posters behind the protective glass and looked at what was playing. After an inspection, she realized that she was a little behind the times. She had never heard of these films, although she actually kept up with them. Guillermo del Toro's At the Mountains of Madness was the first thing that forced itself upon her. She appreciated the worlds Howard Phillips Lovecraft created, despite his then socially established racism. He had to be forgiven for his overall style. When you were paid per word, every description, every subordinate clause, every inconsequential detail, and no matter how inflationary adjective counted. And writers for pulp magazines like Weird got paid a dime each. Del Toro, on the other hand, was an absolute master of his craft. But somehow she had experienced enough cosmic horror today, whether it had happened or not. Edgar Wright's Ant-Man was another option. She loved what Wright created with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, especially their Cornetto trilogy. But she was in absolutely no mood for MCU.
Have they done another remake of it?
She asked herself. And who would still voluntarily keep track of all of them? Quentin Tarantino's Killer Cow was more to her liking. But somehow, she was also in the wrong mood for an orgy of violence with witty dialogue. Her decision fell on Anomaly, with a certain Charlotte Redford, and from the makers of Science, apparently awarded 5 Golden Globes and Oscars each, prizes from Cannes and Venice included. A film that, like the others, had completely escaped her. She must have gotten out of touch in the last few months, as the saying went, and had to come to terms with it.
Other things kept me busy.
She entered the foyer, strode straight to the cash register, where a young man about her age handed out the tickets. He seemed rather bored, with his eyes half closed. His enthusiasm came out all the stronger when he tore open the pop eyes so that they almost spilled out of him. At least she had his full attention.
1 Anomaly, please. It's in original sound, right?
Yup, this show is. Good choice,
He replied in an upbeat manner.
the best Olsen there ever was.
The best what?
She asked unknowingly, almost dealing him a blow.
Eilif Olsen, probably the most famous director of our time?
Ah,
She feigned cluelessness.
I hope the film is as good as claimed.
They just didn't want to give them all the awards.
His subtle attempts at flirtation missed her entirely. The way he smiled at her didn't even catch her eye. She rather wondered how, as a self-confessed movie nerd, she had never heard of the film, the actors, or this supposedly legendary director, and remained blind to his advances.
Would you like some nibbles?
He asked, blushing.
Some popcorn would be something, actually.
She replied. And he immediately strode to the counter, filled her a paper cup, and made the clientele at the ticket booth dangle for her sake.
This counter is actually closed.
He confessed. And before she could ask why he was offering it, the mystery cleared itself.
It's on the house.
And he handed her the nibbles. She thanked him, still pondering about the movie, and unwittingly ignored how he was wooing her. Before he could muster the courage to ask her for her number, she turned around and simply walked away. He lacked the audacity to call after her. And yet, she heard him say, as if he was purposely talking to himself out loud,
Wow, what a cream puff. Why do they always have to be so arrogant?
belated lout years or not. She wasn't going to let this slide. Unexpectedly, she turned around, asking challengingly,
Excuse me?
and he, embarrassingly unmasked, reacted with real shock. Not because he elicited a response from her, but because she couldn't possibly have heard.
I didn't say anything.
He vowed timidly, strangely sincere and ashamed. Small as he became before her, she no longer wanted to tear off a strip of him. Unwanted suitors got her into trouble more often than not. To some degree, she had built up a tolerance, antibodies of an emotional immune system. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like arrogance at times, but it was more passivity. The delays caused by such incidents were annoying. This time, it resulted in her entering the movie theater last. It was packed to the brim, and she arrived in the pitch dark, tripped over one of the steps, and scattered the top layer of her free popcorn. The trailers for upcoming movies were already playing, so that the visitors who had just purchased a ticket for this screening could also plan their next visit to the cinema.
At least I didn't miss anything important.
People were still talking or rustled with their snacks. She hoped there would be more silence during the movie, squeezed through the 7th row to her seat. She picked up on discussions in which people were about the main actors, and the director, KLEIO.EXE, would have never been able to join in the conversation. It wasn't until the film finally started that the commotion died down. But even during the screening, she felt like she was in the wrong movie. Not because she chose the wrong one. That one was all right, significantly less than people were led to believe. Pretty standard science fiction, even if a few ideas worked out well, and the message got across that people didn't need microchips in their brains for a sense of belonging, unless transhumanism got out of hand, and it was tedious to always know what others were thinking. She regretted not going to Mountains of Madness. It was, meanwhile, more in line with her state of mind. Like an alien slug, the horror crawled down her spine, feeding on her paranoia and melting in the salt of sweaty skin. That's how she would have translated the feeling into the movie that she was actually going through. She tried to focus her thoughts on the movie, but kept digressing. Of all things, when the plot was picking up speed, and KLEIO had to strain to follow it at all, the people around her started chatting with each other. Not just the usual suspects, 2 rows in front of and behind her, as well as next to her, they indulged in chatter. An unintelligible murmur, a whisper. Everyone seemed to be talking. A chaotic, often senseless confusion. It was impossible for her to concentrate on the film. The fact that she didn't know these award-winning leading actors was making her feel horror.
By KLEIO.EXE.
Could this be his first film? The hullabaloo people were making about it hardly gave the impression that it was a debutante. It gave her a hard time. The plot was complex, but the sequence of events was not memorable enough to make one think along voluntarily. Overall, it was the kind of film that came out when you took a short story and turned it into a 3-hour epic, filling it with ideas of your own that you might as well leave out without affecting the plot. Whatever they were after was lost. When the credits rolled, KLEIO had no idea what the film was about in the end. Only the framework of the plot and predictable ending remained, essentially like something out of a bad trailer. The gobbledygook spoiled her cinematic experience, all the inconsistencies of the film industry. How unknown most of the faces and names involved were to her. The productions of all the films, which ran at the moment. She probably wasn't as much of a movie buff as she thought. Subliminally, misgivings sprouted. Since the incident, something wasn't right with her, and at the same time with everything else. When the credits rolled, KLEIO was already at the exit and left the cinema as quickly as possible. Since the death of her father, she didn't experience something alike. She suffered some kind of panic attack. She hyperventilated and felt her hands go numb. Only with the fresh air at the entrance did her breathing become more regular, and immediately came to a standstill with a shock when her smartphone rang at the highest volume, her ringtone, the theme tune from A Clockwork Orange, and it was as if it were passing between her ears as a marching band. She listened intently to the full length and missed the call. Only after he hung up on the other end did she pull the device from her coat and inspected the message on the screen. Leon had already written half an hour ago. Apparently, KLEIO had forgotten about time altogether while passing it. She read,
Are at the Koperniker. Do you want me to pick you up somewhere?
She came down a little, although the fear remained in the back of her mind that she had just suffered a series of small strokes. For the last time, there was a chance to see a doctor and get to the bottom of the real problem that must have been in her head, instead of letting the party girl out. But KLEIO.EXE did not want to give in to this fear, was not a rational person anyway. She made her way to the nearest bus stop. It must have been because of her tension that she didn't see the bus coming, and a job-related frustration of the bus driver that he simply drove past her. When she looked in his direction, there was no bus there. As soon as she turned around, he passed by her. Almost an hour late, KLEIO arrived at her meeting place. In her distraction, little did she think that Leon and his entourage would be waiting for her. Before the feast on forbidden ground,